Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon again. My name is Sullivan. Zandera was my older brother. I would like to start off and say the 15 years life sentence was something me and my family did not agree to. We were strongly against it and felt like it was forced upon us. I believe you take a life, you deserve life. Period. I want you to understand, it took me years before I was able to drive past Seaver Street where the murder took place. Receiving this parole hearing information in the mail just opened up old wounds from 1995. The hurt and pain remains, but I had to prepare myself mentally because I knew this day would eventually come. Knowing he may step back into society to be with his family and be able to be a dad again to his daughter does not sit right with me. It hurts to the point I can't stand looking at him. As the days was approaching, I started experiencing restless nights, tension, sadness, anger, thinking about the possibility of him being released. Just knowing it's a chance me and my family may run into him one day brings me grief all over again. I asked my brother's daughter if she would like to write something. Her response was, "What do you say to a murderer?" That was enough said. I'm sure the pain in the absence of not having a father to share milestones, experiences, everyday moments is unbearable. I need you to know we could never forgive you what you have done. Let's not forget the fact you had an extra 15 years on a run, living your life, changing your identity, while me and my family suffered every day. My brother's life was cut short 29 years ago. He did not make the conscious decision to turn himself in once he did wrong. I hope you take that into consideration when making your final decision. I need to say this again, the 15-year life sentence was not enough. The day we received the news from the DA he was finally captured, we was able to start the healing process. I would never be healed. For my family and my sake, I hope the original plan is still in place for him to be deported if he was ever released. He came here as a legal immigrant. Why should he be able to stay here to continue his life? My brother's not here to continue his life. Let's not forget, he still don't have the tools or the paperwork, so eventually you go back to familiar behaviors. The deaths you experience were never equivalent to the murder you have done. He came here to live a better life, but was committing felonies with domestic violence and murders. Lastly, I hope someone kills you so your family could experience the pain that my family had to go through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, he was my older brother. This all happened when I was like 10, 11. So, going through that, it makes you crazy. They put me in therapy. I had to figure out how to live my life while he's out doing God knows what. So it's like 15 years is not enough for a murder. How would he feel if someone killed one of his kids? How would he feel? How would you feel if he killed one of your children or your siblings? We're gonna give 15 years for murder? This is what Trump's talking about. People come here, do all type of crazy stuff, and what is their punishment? Get deported to go back, live their life wherever they from. Nothing happens. 15 years is not enough. I do want revenge. He should not be released. And if I ran into him, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna do something. How would he feel if someone killed one of these people on this side? He don't like it. We don't like it. He wouldn't want me to get off if I did something to one of his kids. So, if it was your family, you're gonna be up here mad too. He talking about, oh, he didn't get to be there for his children. His daughter's over there crying. Why is she crying? Because he took a knife and stabbed someone in the neck. That's not what we do here. So, you can't sit there and, I was waiting for the violence to cue.
Did you write your testimony?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Okay,
Okay, I got you.
Thank
So it
you.
seemed like they was gonna play the violins for this sad story. He's in Shirley, it's boring. You do the programs to hope you get a lighter sentence. When you go to parole board, I know a lot of people in Shirley, what do? You put on the glasses and a nice little outfit and come up here and tell you exactly what you want to hear. I would do the same thing. Tell you exactly what you want to hear. Because I want to get out. I don't want to sit in that cell. Only thing he don't got is the glasses. This is not a new story. I'm sure you see this every day. Come up here and tell you exactly what you want to hear. Make it sound good so I can get out. I want to go live my life. He gets out, he gets deported. Then what? He gonna go over there, kill, sell drugs, be abusive. Don't say you ain't gonna do it. We all say what people want to hear. So it doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. His daughter don't have a father. He's talking about, oh, he wants to talk to his kids. So what? Can she talk to her father? He's over there in the graveyard off Cedar Street. So I'm not gonna lie. If I see him in Boston, I'm gonna do something. He's not gonna just walk around and think it's okay. He's not getting forgiveness. I'm never gonna forgive him. I'm still dealing with traumatic thoughts because of what he did. I gotta deal with learning how to have a relationship. But in the back of my mind, oh, there's killers out here, and he's one of them. My brother got killed on 236 Cedar Street, and I had to just live life like nothing happened. I'm in therapy trying to figure it out. My grandmother couldn't cope. My mother, she turned into a worse alcoholic than she already was. So, no, ain't no forgiveness. Ain't no, oh, I want to talk to my kids. I don't care about your kids. If you really have remorse, you would have turned yourself in. No, you went on the run. You never thought about turning yourself in because you were scared. Doesn't matter. You knew you did wrong. So if I do something, you gonna want me to turn myself in? Or if I do something, is 15 years enough? Is he gonna feel like 15 years is enough? Because he's not gonna just get out and be a changed person. When you're in jail, you're bored. You're doing these programs for this. Y'all gonna sit here and be like, oh, he's a different person. He's not a different person. We do this to get out.
What was the age difference between you and Peter?
Peter was 21 when he got killed. I was 11. So we 10 years apart, but no, my family got torn apart because of this. No, there's no forgiveness. There's no, oh, I'm a different person now. You're not a different person. And there's no forgiveness. He's not gonna be happy if someone stabbed one of his daughters in the neck. We got family that's like torn apart because of this. I don't know, Sarah, do you have any siblings? If he stabbed your brother in the neck, how many years is adequate?
All right.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
No, I mean like the feeling of it.
I know. I mean, I know this is.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you can't stab someone in the neck and be like, oh, I did my program, I'm ready to get out and live my life. There's no living life. My brother's in Cedar Grove Cemetery, and he's talking about, I'm ready to get back out here and
Go to
date.
Jamaica.
All right, I mean,
There's no more dating, like.
You're at the 5.
I'm sorry, all right.
We truly appreciate you coming in today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Charles Marshall. I'm here on behalf of the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office representing the Commonwealth. We are respectfully asking this board to deny Mr. Brown's petition at this time. First, I will acknowledge that it does appear that Mr. Brown has been taking the right steps while incarcerated. That is clear based on the lack of any kind of disciplinary and misconduct reports that we've received, as well as the numerous programs that he's attended while incarcerated. However, we are still making that request for several reasons. First, because of the defendant's actions in the years leading up to the murder, as well as in the years following it. Secondly, because of the version of events given by the defendant both in the pre-hearing process as well as today are starkly contrasted by the evidence in front of the board and that was gathered throughout this investigation, all of which, when taken together, raise serious concerns about his rehabilitation, the amount of accountability he's willing to accept, and his ability to remain at liberty without violating the law, and that concern strongly suggests that it is not in the best interest of society at this time to release him. I will mention that I hope the board is aware I did submit some additional material and exhibits, and I see the chair does have those. I will be referencing them throughout my statement, but I would ask you to review them as well. First, detailing the events of May 29th, when Peter Sullivan was murdered. So today, nearly 30 years later, Mr. Brown suggested on that night he was simply coming over to the house for the innocent reason of seeing He and Miss Jones shared daughter before leaving to New York. Despite it being about midnight, around when police responded, so around 11:30 or so when this incident took place, and despite the fact that he was armed with a knife, he referred to it today as a moment of senselessness and a reckless act. However, that version of events, while kinder to Mr. Brown, is contradicted by much of the evidence. First, Miss Jones was the only person who was actually present for at least part of that incident. We know from her statements and from her grand jury testimony, which was not initially submitted but is submitted now, that Mr. Brown knew she was dating Peter, and he had expressed to her directly in the time preceding the murder that he was upset about it. He had also told her, according to her grand jury testimony, that on previous occasions that if he ever caught her with someone else, that he would kill them. She is even pressed by the grand jury about what he meant by them, and she said, and I quote, "He said them. Sometimes he said both of us, but he really meant, and he kept saying the other guy. He would kill him." Secondly, that's corroborated by Peter's sister Shakoya's statement to investigators on the day directly following the murder, when she stated that Peter had been receiving phone calls from Mr. Brown in the lead up and long before the murder itself. Also, we know from Miss Jones's grand jury testimony that Peter's car was parked right out in front of Mrs. Jones' apartment, that Mr. Brown knew what kind of car he drove, that when he arrived he was banging on the door, not knocking politely. Ultimately, he broke into the house based on Jones testifying that she heard a bang, and the detective testifying that he found paint chips on the floor and damage to the door as well. Miss Jones stated that he said something to the effect of, "Oh, you're busted, I've seen you two in here," when he ultimately came into the bedroom and pulled the knife. She saw him run after Peter out of the house, still armed with the knife at the time, and stated that he was in a rage. Also, I'll point out, and I know the members of the board raised this as well, but it wasn't a pocket knife or a switchblade that could be innocently explained as a commonly carried item, but instead what the defendant himself referred to as a Rambo blade. Lastly, just in terms of the incident itself, I want to point out the nature of the injuries. Specifically, the wounds were directly to Peter's back, as well as the back of his neck. The neck wound, which was the fatal in and of itself, was a penetrating stab wound, not a slash mark or a laceration. It was 3.5 inches deep. The one directly on his back was a horizontally oriented stab wound, suggesting that it was plunged. Also was not a laceration or a stab. It was about 1.5 inches deep. I will concede that the autopsy report does state that there are other superficial wounds on his back and his neck, as well as one superficial wound on his chest. However, there were no defensive wounds, and there was no evidence of trauma anywhere else on the body, which I think is highly suggestive of the fact that he was attacked from behind, and that the initial aggressor was Mr. Brown, and does not suggest there was any kind of wrestling matches based on where those injuries are and the nature of those injuries. Moving on to his previous criminal activity, I'll skip past most of it because the board has addressed most, but I do want to highlight a few specific things. First, the defendant himself states that in 1992, when he arrived, he almost immediately began engaging in criminal activity with his uncle. He states that sometime around 1992, he was arrested for trafficking offenses. However, I can't find that reflected on any documentation, but I will credit that, I suppose. He states he was placed on probation, but despite that, he admits in his statement pre-hearing that he continued to sell and transport weed for his uncle all throughout 1993. There's also, as the chair noticed, there's a prior firearm conviction in 1993 out of the Boston Municipal Court in Brighton, in which he was sentenced to 2 years in the House of Corrections, suspended for 2 years until December 15th of 1995, and was on probation with a suspended sentence at the time that he did commit this murder, all of which is highly suggestive of his problems with recidivism and the fact that he is likely to commit if released. I won't touch on the other incidents of domestic violence, but I would ask that in addition to the ones that were reported and have been provided in police reports, there were also several unreported incidents of domestic assault that are contained in some of the investigative reports that were taken by the homicide detective throughout the course of this investigation that does suggest there were several other incidents that did not result in police involvement. Also, and I know the chair referenced this as well, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in one of those investigative reports, Ms. Tracy Brown does indicate to police that there was several instances of her being raped throughout the course of the incident, although I will concede that was only first brought up in about 2011 after his arrest and after detectives re-engaged with Ms. Jones at the time. Lastly, I do want to just highlight the fact that in the immediate time running up to this incident, there were several allegations that he had tried to break in before but had been thwarted, that he had cut telephone lines, and again, there's that instance that he allegedly snuck into the house, set up pictures everywhere, so it does suggest that he was breaking into the house pretty regularly in the lead up to this murder. Lastly, I do just want to talk about his activity while he was on the run in Jamaica, Costa Rica, Belize, and other countries as well. So during this time, he took significant effort and showed some significant skill in evading detection. Some of the exhibits that I submitted just today are photos of his Massachusetts IDs when he arrived in America, as well as his Costa Rican IDs, all of which contain different names, different passwords, which does, I believe, show that he is very deliberate and skilled at evading detection. And I also want to point out that there is some information that he was continuing to engage in criminal conduct all the way up to the point that he was ultimately apprehended. He self-admits to engaging in drug sales with his sister while in Costa Rica. However, and this is exhibited in a press release from the State Department that I submitted today, that he was being investigated by authorities in Costa Rica for suspected involvement in a Jamaican drug